Hey folks, like in most places in North America, here in Nova Scotia, February is known as African Heritage Month. And Shelburne is a wonderful historical place when it comes to a group of people known as the Black Loyalists. Shelburne was one of the major landing points for these people after the Revolutionary War in the 1700s. Coming up later this month, I do want to do a live interview with a local historian who can share with us his knowledge about the Black Loyalists, about their lives here in Shelburne and a little community nearby called Birchtown. I also hope to do a collaboration with the YouTube folks over at What's Bothering Me Today. They recently did a great video on a gentleman by the name of David George, who was a Black Loyalist pastor here in Shelburne, who was sort of dragged into something called the Shelburne race riots. And I'm kind of hoping we can do something together where we talk about that. But today, I really want to jump into history. You see, in the comments a couple of days ago, somebody made mention of a Utah school board that allowed parents to opt their children out of any activities or events centered around Black History Month. And while I think that's deplorable that a parent would pull their kid out, I want to explain why. Because I am a history buff. I love history. I read all kinds of history. There's a bunch of channels that I watch here on YouTube that teach me history. I was never a great student in school, but history classes always were able to keep my attention. But in all my time in school, I was 38 years old before I learned about the Black Loyalists. It wasn't until my very first trip here to Shelburne that I learned about the Black Loyalists. Now, I grew up in Miramichi, New Brunswick, and we focused a lot on maritime history. We studied about the Fathers of Confederation. We studied about the settling of Halifax and St. John and how they grew. In Miramichi, we studied about shipbuilding. We studied about lumber. We studied about fishing. We studied about the English and the French and how they got along. We studied about the Miramichi Fire of 1825. We studied about Fredericton and how it grew to be the place it was. And so when I say all this, the Loyalists were a major part of that study. The Loyalists in school were they were something that New Brunswickers, that Maritimers were proud of. We were settled by the Loyalists. We were settled by these folks that came up here who were loyal to the king. And after the Revolutionary War, they made this place great. And never once did I ever hear about the Black Loyalists. And I swear, I paid attention. I paid attention in history class. It wasn't like French class where I didn't listen at all. It was history. I loved it. And they never, ever told me about the Black Loyalists. As a matter of fact, I don't ever recall stumbling across a book about the Black Loyalists. Ever. Another thing in school that I never learned of at all. Social studies, history, whatever. At all. Was about our residential schools here in Canada. I had no idea that they existed. I had no idea that our Canadian government had set something up where they were dragging children from their families to indoctrinate them into our ways of being under the guise of education, under the guise of providing a better life. I had no idea that residential schools actually existed. And to my shame, and this is because I easily could have found this if I had been looking, if I had known to look. The last residential schools in Canada didn't close until the mid-1990s. I had no idea they existed. I assumed that the children on our reserves were getting the same kind of education I was, that they had all the same kind of benefits that I had. Except, of course, we were taught about all the benefits that Indigenous people got and how lucky they were. Now that last part, just in case you were wondering, yes, that was me being sarcastic, because it's a crock. You see, myths like that are perpetuated because we don't understand the truth behind it all. And we don't understand the truth behind it all is because we don't teach our children the darker parts of our history. We teach them about the glorious moments. We teach them about the victorious battles. We teach them about liberating other countries from fascism. We teach them about how our ancestors, our grandparents, our great-grandparents were heroes, pioneers, rough and tumble, carved this nation out of nothing. Happy to teach those stories. Happy to teach about the innovators, the inventors, the people that brought technology to us, that made this world a better place. But we don't talk about the darker things. We don't talk about the darker parts of history because we're afraid of it. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to dredge that stuff up. We don't want to regurgitate that stuff and bring it all back up to the front. We want to move forward. Let's just move forward together. Why can't we all just be united and go into the future, one big happy family? Let's leave the past in the past. I don't want to feel bad about that. But the truth is, we don't have to feel bad about it. Nobody is saying, understand the darker parts of our history, understand the vile, evil things that our ancestors have done so that you can walk around feeling guilty. That's not the point of it. The point is, if we understand all of our history, the things that we are proud of and the things that we might be ashamed of, if we can understand it all, then we can make sure that we never do it again. We can make sure that it doesn't keep coming back on its own. And we can teach our children not to walk those same paths. You see, knowing our history, knowing the darker parts of our history does not create division. It shows us the division that's there. Holding on and saying, no, we need to talk about what happened. We need to talk about what was. We need to explore and investigate what was going on. Does not cause division. It shows us the division. Because it's only in seeing the division, it's only in understanding how wide it is and how deep it is and what caused it, that we can move forward to start building bridges, to rebuilding trust, so that at some time in the future we can work together. We don't have to be afraid of our history. We need to be willing to look at our past. We need to be willing to look at our mistakes so that we can actually see the damage that was done, if we truly want to heal it. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you, and may you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And as we walk forward together, I pray that our eyes and our ears and our hearts would be open to understanding what was, so that we can truly create the future we all want together. Amen.